Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about navigating the twists and turns of life and embracing the imperfections of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches Catherine and Kirsty, and our mission is to support you in finding your own path, your own way, with greater clarity and self trust, no matter how messy or uncertain things may seem.
We address the roadblocks that come up time and time again for our coaching clients, from acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
As well as asking lots of questions, a coach's favourite thing to do, we'll be sharing thoughts and insights and offering plenty of tips, tools, and techniques for you to try.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. So last week we spoke a bit about mind reading and how that can get us into a little bit of trouble. So this week's tips, tools and techniques bite-sized episode is how to be a better mind reader, which obviously we mean as a bit of a joke, because really what we're talking about is what to perhaps spot when you think you might know something when actually it's an assumption rather than knowledge.
Yes, how to be a better mind reader is basically by not mind reading. But no, more seriously, the answer is basically to cultivate awareness of when you're mind reading and to learn to question it. So it's, like we said last week, being able to pick up on indicators that something might be different for somebody, that something might be going on, but to question that and your interpretation of it. So, and we are aiming in this episode to actually make it bite size. I mean, some of our regular listeners might be thinking in a mind ready sort of way, but based on evidence, bite size, yeah, right. These two can't do bite size. They'll be here for
Oh, it's going to
hours.
be this time. We're going to make it. We
We're,
will.
we're, we're okay. We're going to power through now. So, when you spot a mind reading conclusion, your assumption about how somebody else is thinking or feeling or what they know about your thoughts and feelings, the trick is to question it to understand what evidence there is and what else it could mean. So, when it comes to spotting mind reading conclusions, look for things you're thinking about how somebody is thinking, feeling, especially about you, without them having actually expressed it to you. The things like, they don't like me, I can tell they're not listening. Consider any motivations you're assuming about somebody or for someone's behaviour. They're just doing it to annoy me. And look for your assumptions about what people know and remember about you. They know I don't like that. They know I'd rather not do that. And then start questioning it. We love a question. We're coaches.
We do.
It's all about the questions. Questioning and awareness. That's what we're at. It's kind of like Q&A, but different. Anyway, I'm not going to get distracted. There you go. So, how do you question your mind reading? When you notice one of those types of conclusions we just mentioned, ask yourself, how do I know this? What makes me think this? What evidence is there for this? Could the evidence mean something else? Because remember, you may be noticing something that is evidence of something. It's not necessarily
Yes.
evidence of what you think it is.
Yeah.
So, what evidence is there for this is a really useful question. But then, could that evidence mean something else? Does the evidence always have to mean this? That's particularly useful in generalizations. If you notice words like always or never, everyone, that kind of thing. Does the evidence always have to mean this? And do I always see that evidence with that person or just in a specific situation? It's things that are specific to an individual and just how they are. It's just something that's specific to a situation, a one-off.
And I think it's important. They're such good questions. And I think we need to remember about that reverse direction we spoke about last week as well, when we think someone else must know how we're feeling or what we're thinking when we haven't told them, to ask ourselves, well, actually, was that a fair assumption for
Hmm.
us to have? On what basis must they know that about us, that we'd be currently thinking or feeling? What are we assuming that they have knowledge of or understanding about us that maybe they just don't have? And also, it'll be context dependent. You might just be having a bad day. You're
Hmm.
very, very aware of that bad day. It's put you in a grump, and therefore you're doing perhaps some things that you wouldn't normally, you know, be talking in a certain way
Yeah.
or have a low mood or whatever. And you're very aware of that. But the other person may not be, even though you think it's blindingly obvious, it actually
Yes.
isn't necessarily for somebody else. So yeah, asking those sorts of questions in the reverse situation, I think is also really helpful.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Your own bad day can be so all encompassing that you forget that other people aren't seeing that your bad day from their perspective. They don't know that's happening to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's run through a quick example then of what that sort of noticing of your mind reading and questioning it might look like. So you've had a conversation with Fred and you come away thinking, Fred doesn't like me. And you notice that thought. But what makes me think that? Well, he ignored me. How did he ignore me? What did he do to show he was ignoring me? He didn't look at me when I was talking to him. He clearly wasn't listening to me. But then there's so many questions on that. Does not looking at someone always mean not listening? What else could cause him to not look at me when I'm speaking? Does not listening to someone necessarily mean not liking them? Have I ever not looked at someone even though I was listening? And in terms of the whole context and individual specific stuff, you might want to think about what if Fred has eye contact or distraction issues associated with neurodivergence. I mean, okay, the latter may indeed mean he's not listening if it's very distracted, but that tells you nothing about whether Fred likes me or not. I mean, what if I spoke to Fred at a time when he was busy and distracted? Perhaps he didn't want to tell me it wasn't a good time because he actually likes me and doesn't want me to think that he's being rude. What if him staring into space is a sign that he's processing what I'm saying? Maybe I've made a really excellent point that he's thinking about. Okay, that's not very likely, but it's possible. And I mean, I know I tend to do this. If somebody says something that really gets me thinking, I'm staring off into space processing that.
Mm.
It's a compliment to about how they've made me think. And I'm just minimizing the distraction while I'm processing that. So in that situation, Fred doesn't like me, can go to, I wonder what was going on there. And maybe what you could do is ask Fred, I notice you seem very distracted when I'm talking. Or, is there something wrong? Or are we okay?
Sometimes we're afraid just to sort of name it, aren't we? And we sort of assume it instead. So actually, the thought is still there, which is just as damaging as maybe
Yeah.
acknowledging it, naming it, and seeing if there is something actually. Because maybe you did interrupt him, for example, in the middle of something really important, and it's a conversation you'll have at a later date, and it'll be much more fruitful. You'll both be listening to each other, and you don't
Hmm.
come away with the feelings of this person doesn't like me. It was actually nothing to do with you, which is a point you made in last week's
Yeah.
episode. We make it about us. He doesn't like me. Actually, that wasn't true. You might have just had inopportune timing, which you didn't know, but of course they did. So you only get to plug that gap by perhaps asking the right question.
Yeah. Or being open to
Mm.
considering the possibility that you're wrong about your conclusion and then seeing what happens another time when it might go very differently. And you're thinking, actually, I think he does like me. And there's also something here around future mind reading, which we didn't touch on so much last week, but this is putting thoughts about how we think somebody will react to something we haven't actually done yet. Because that's based entirely on us projecting our own map of the world onto somebody else. And it can lead to pressuring ourselves into doing things that we don't want to do. It's thoughts like they'll think I'm ungrateful if I say no. They'll think I'm getting above myself if I disagree with that colleague. They'll think I'm rude if I don't stay longer. They'll never ask me to join them again if I don't go this time. They'll think I'm boring. They won't like me. They won't talk to me. All these things based on our map of the world, our experiences, our expectations, etc., etc., with no evidence, no actual evidence about this specific situation that hasn't even happened yet with this specific person or people. And these thoughts can be questioned in pretty much the same way we've already discussed. How do I know this? What makes me think this? What evidence is there for this? What else could that evidence mean?
Yeah. So as you were saying this, it reminded me. of a recent episode we had where sometimes we're thinking no and we end up saying yes, probably because there is some of this future mind reading at play because we think, oh, I need to say yes so I will be accepted by the group, or I need to say yes so they think I'm part of the team. And actually, and I think
Hmm.
you gave an example of when you was all put on the spot and asked to go to a Christmas do, but actually said no, and it was fine. And it just goes to
Yes.
show that that's a prime example of, well, maybe you didn't let the future mind reading take hold too much in that situation, or you realise actually I can just say that not this time for me, and it
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily going to lead to all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you actually ask yourself those questions and consider your answers, it can change how you deal with difficult situations and manage your relationships with other people. And another question, a couple of questions to ask that I think can apply both whether you are mind reading about what has happened with somebody, what might happen with somebody, what people think about you, whether they are able to mind read you or not. Would I react this way if I were in the other person's shoes? So if you're assuming that somebody is going to, or perhaps has made a decision about you, or is behaving in a certain way for a particular reason, would you behave like that if you were them in that situation? And if not, what's making me assume this person is going to be so much more judgmental or badly behaved than you? But if yes, what would help you see things differently? What could change that outcome for you that you can now apply to the situation? And that, I think, is the end of our tips, tools, and techniques in a pretty bite-sized episode by our standards.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think really, as you said early on, the moral of the story was do less of the mind reading and and find some good questions, which can be ones that you're asking just of yourself. Actually, that's also the beauty of it. If you're not as comfortable as saying some of these out loud and really being direct with another person, you can sort of do some of those internal questions at least first or at all to get a bit further away from the assumptions, because we all know assumptions are dangerous. So
Yeah.
it's a way of doing that.
Notice your assumptions and question them. That's what it
Yeah,
comes down to.
perfect.
And that's it from us. Bite size, as promised. Well, we think so anyway. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect. We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of our episodes, especially if you've had a light bulb moment in answering one of the questions, have benefited from one of the tips, or have a suggestion for an episode topic.
And if these conversations have made you curious about how coaching could help you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with one or both of us to find out more about what we offer. Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.